Hello, everybody, and welcome to One World, One Blood Bowl, uh, number 61. And it's an absolute thrill to be here. I should probably start by apologising and confessing. Those of you concerned by my cough during the last episode were right to be so. During the editing of that episode, I was indeed taken to hospital with a quite serious respiratory infection, which I have now seen the back of. So hopefully, better days lie ahead for me health wise. I'm not entirely out of the woods, but I'm certainly a lot better. Now, thankfully, I'm not always a completely lazy sod. And prior to disappearing for a little bit, I had organised some One World, One Blood Bowls. Now, the one between then and now did have to get cancelled because I wasn't available. But this one was already on the runway, ready to go. So I'm pleased we've been able to make it happen. And I've been joined by three lovely people, all of whom have volunteered to be here. I didn't have to press gang anyone into it. So when we did the one on painting, I was contacted by Hedningen, the person to my side as you look. I would say my left as I'm looking at it, but technically my right, but actually that is my left because cameras. It's all very weird. Um, and they said it's all very well talking to all these people that paint stuff, but what stuff are they painting in the first place? Who's made it? I said, well, I mean, obviously Games Workshop make it, except the ones that are made by people that aren't Games Workshop. And they went, aha! So there are sculptors and kit bashers and modelers out there that are involved with Blood Bowl, and you've never talked to any of them. And to my shame, I had to confess that was probably true, nor did I contemplate for a minute that these people were part of my hobby. But they are. And as you know, on One World, One Blood Bowl, not only do I mean that there is only one game that we all play, and that we're all just players of the game, and hence we should treat each other with respect and as decent with decency, but that there is no corner of the hobby that isn't part of Blood Bowl. And that the more we love and play Blood Bowl, the more we should talk to and understand other people that are involved with Blood Bowl in whatever way they are. So it's time that we corrected that. So Hedningen, I then instantly that evening said, I've had this weird email from someone who wants to come on my show. Do you think there's any interest in me doing a show about sculpting, modelling and kit bashing? And on the very stream where I was chatting to Runbad about it, the lovely Celaino, who is directly above me, leapt forward and said, not only should you be talking about it, but I want to come on and talk about kitbashing. Look, the way I say things are true. I tell a good story. They don't have to be factual. They just have to illustrate a greater truth. So that's where we got our second guest from. And then in conversation with them and other people on my server is available on my Discord if anyone wants to come and play there. And it's where sometimes I throw ideas for One World, One Blood Bowl around. I said, who else should we be getting on? And absolutely everybody agreed that we should get Pedro Gomez on. But a couple of people, quite a lot of people actually, also
If I
said,
could step in,
or
Pedro
Brutefun.
Ramirez.
Pedro Ramirez, yes,
Vamos.
of Gaspes Arts, isn't it, and other places.
Other various groups, yeah. And
Yeah,
the if you're on Facebook, the Pedro Ramos fan club is where he does some limited release miniatures.
yeah. I mean, he is a fantastic sculptor, and one of Blood Bowl's leading lights. But so is Brutefun, and
Yes,
Brutefun is very much of the modern millennia. Whereas blessed as Pedro is, maybe he's getting a little out of date now. So, we're having brute fun. The party's just begun. If you, like me, have ever been on Etsy, it has been impossible to not see brute fun's various kit designs and STL files. I don't even know what that means. Available and his lovely pieces. I have one in my collection. I'm sure a lot of people do. And he does full teams, and he does stars, and he does all sorts of other stuff. And I thought that what a modern way to look at modelling, because I don't even know whether those are modelled in the real world and then become digital, or if they're always digital. So that's certainly one question I can ask this evening. So hopefully we've covered sort of three different aspects to the making of Blood Bowl figures, and that's what we're going to be talking about this evening. And obviously about Blood Bowl as well, because as always, this is my way into just talking about Blood Bowl. So hello everybody, say hello.
hi.
Hello. Hello.
And weirdly, I'm actually not going to start with Hedningen. I think we should start with Celaino. So you're a kit basher. Is that fair? Is that a term that I should be using correctly there?
Um, I wouldn't describe myself as a kid basher.
How would
I
you
would
describe it?
describe myself.
I mean, when I have friends that do painting of things, and they take the models out of the sprue, clean the bits off, glue them together, and then they paint them, and then they play Blood Bowl. That's not what you do, is it?
Yes, most of the time I do, but I would describe myself more as a converter than a kid-basher.
Okay.
And for me, there's a difference with a kid bashing. What I expect a kid basher to do is to take parts from mostly plastic kits and modern kits and rearrange the pieces to have a completely new model.
Right, so swapping a head or an arm or a leg or something.
Yeah, most of the times. But I started Blood Bowl way back, and main chunk of the miniatures I have is still chunky and metal. So for me, it's more cutting up metal minis and then rearranging the bits I got from cutting pieces up.
Wow.
So it's less kits bashing than really converting and making more or less Frankenstein monsters out of existing metal minis.
A bit more sculpting involved in that process too.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is a continuum, isn't it? Because so what you do is you take mostly always metal. Have you worked at all with the resins or plastics and things?
I do use some plastic bits, and maybe in the few pictures that you'll show later, there are pieces of plastic that I use to complete or to give an extra arm or a spare arm or to replace a part which I do not have in metal, or I do not find the appropriate piece I want in my metal bits. But most of the time, as my collection is dating from way back, most of the times it's metal, and it's cutting with hacksaws and drilling pieces and putting them back together and then sculpting to
I was going to ask, how do you fix 3 bits of metal to a bit of plastic to? And you said little hacksaws and things. Do you solder? Is it glue? Is it?
It's glued, but to make the pieces join up and stay together, usually I drill a little hole in each piece and then put a little rod of metal, which is usually a piece of a paper clip, for the 2 pieces to have more surface to adhere together.
Right. So a pin through each one, so that they're sticking to the pin and the pin's holding it all together.
Yep.
That makes sense. What got you started? What made you think suddenly, not just I've got 12 good metal figures, I could go play Blood Bowl, or I could get hold of little tiny hacksaws, a little drill, and spend hours in my bedroom making them slightly different, and then go and play Blood Bowl. How does that decision come about?
There's 2 things that make that come about. First thing is that Games Workshop at a certain point in time really left the game, and it was up to.
They abandoned us.
They abandoned the community, and so no new miniatures were made for us to be playing with them. So I had a couple of teams, but I still wanted some more. And in the beginning, there were no Brutefuns or Pedro Ramoses or whatever people coming up with new miniatures. So you had to resort to taking a Warhammer 40k miniature and cutting up the weapons, cutting away the weapons, and try to reposition them to make them more or less look like Blood Bowl players.
Right.
So that's one part. The other really what really pushed me into going a bit further is I was on the Talk Fantasy Football, Talk Blood Bowl forum beginning of the 2000s, and there were a couple of people there that were making those conversions and made them really look nice. And just to put 2 names out there, Axiom and Horikim were 2 people that made extensive conversions with mostly older miniatures, 1988 second edition Blood Bowl miniatures, and they looked really superb. When you see a ghoul for a necromantic team that was made up of a second edition elf and legs from one Warhammer ghoul, and they looked so fantastically good that I said, well, maybe I can give it a go, and so I tried.
So what defines good in terms of a good conversion?
Oh,
and I will not accept you no good when you see it.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to give I'm trying to go beyond that obvious sentence. For me, I think the parts have to come together and have to seem to fit well enough together for it to be mistaken for a miniature that could have been conceived that way. It's supposed to look that way.
Right. So once it's painted, people look at it and think, that's a figure. Where do I buy that? Rather than, oh, someone's made that.
Where did you get that? Because where did I buy that? Usually with the older metal minis, you don't have that anymore. People say like, where does this come from? Where did you buy it? How exclusive is this? And so like.
But I'm just long enough in the tabletop to remember back when we didn't have Games Workshop teams being released. To get a Games Workshop team, really you were going on eBay or you were buying the 3 or 4 that some old shop still had in the corner somewhere. And Kickstarters were starting to be a thing. And that's how a lot of the very early teams got funded and made. There were already some around before that, but suddenly this new idea of how we can get it pre-funded before we go to the risk of making one came out. And in a very short space of time, we seem to have sort of democratized the entire of figure making. But at the same time, of course, Games Workshop's still very tough on their rules. If you go to one of their events, you have to use a Games Workshop figure. Do you still base most of yours on Games Workshop figures, or have you really, you've left those nursery slopes now? You see what you want and you find the bits?
Most of the times I see what I want and I find the bits. Now, I have a soft spot for second edition miniatures. So I tend to try and recreate, and one of the, or maybe 2 of the teams that I'm or 2 of the converted teams that I'm kind of proud of is my Renegades team and my second edition Elf team. Second edition Elf team, where I just completed the normal second edition setup with a couple of miniatures to represent witch elves, in order to be able to play them as the current Dark Elf roster or even Pro Elf roster. So most of the bits are still Games Workshop, and sometimes I go beyond when I cannot find anything appropriate or when I find something that is really interesting and I do want to take it on board.
Is there anything, any name or any brand or maker that you really have loved the stuff outside of Games Workshop, or just really what you find from everywhere?
Really, whatever I can find, whatever.
And what's next?
Are
you on the sort of, the having a cheeky smoke of weed behind the bike sheds, whereas these other guys are on the hard cocaine? Are you on the start of this slippery slope? Are you going to end up modelling?
No, I don't think so. I will, I think, remain an amateur and just complete my set of teams. And if somebody asks me to do something for them, then maybe I'll think about it. But
so you've got a figure. It looks perfect. You think, actually, what would really just finish that off is a good cloak. Do you still go searching for the cloak, or can you just get the green stuff out and make yourself a cloak?
I can get the green stuff out.
Okay.
Cloaks are easy with green stuff. So,
Seems to me we're heading into the Hedningen area now. We're beyond sculpting or converting, or even into sculpting. Sorry, away from converting in, and certainly from kitbashing. I do apologise. I didn't realise that was pejorative. Is that how sculpting begins, Hedningen? Does it start with the odd cloak, the odd patch on the armour, and suddenly you think, well, why don't I just build it all from the ground up?
Yeah, pretty much. That's how it usually starts in most cases. When you're just looking at a model and think, okay, this could use something, but I don't know where I would be able to get that part, or if I'm, trying to add a cloak or something, how do I get some extra added to it? Or in my case, some of the first Blood Bowl sculpting I did was adding additional parts to a Chaos team because I wanted to represent mutations gained through a league season.
Right. And that option
Terrible
isn't
idea,
out
by
there.
the way.
I mean, there are. I've seen some. I've seen some figures with sort of um, what's the word? Magnets on their arms so that you can swap in different mutations. But it seems remarkably rare. When I'd have thought people that want to run Chaos want to put the right mutations on. That just doesn't seem a thing that lots of makers have noticed.
Yeah, it's tricky to do, especially for magnets if you're telling people to magnetize, because then you have to make sure that there's these nice little universal arm slots, and depending on what people want to do for their numbering, it's easier to just go, all right, I have this model, and now I can turn it into what I think will work.
So that right
This was
arm,
also
that's going to become a claw.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. We're back in the old days of, if you're playing Chaos, your goal is to get to a claw palm.
So where did you leave converting and go, I'm gonna build this. I've got those skills. How did that
Uh,
happen?
bit of a funny story. I did a little bit of converting, but I originally started going, okay, yeah, I can probably do some sculpting from scratch. This was in about 2020 or so, where,
Okay,
well,
so while
everything
Celaino
was.
was on Talk Fantasy Football, playing his Blood Bowl, seeing these conversions and thinking, I can do that.
Yeah.
You were playing Blood Bowl at this time? Is it Blood Bowl you came from, or did the sculpting bring you to Blood Bowl?
I It's kind of a weird winding journey. I played a couple seasons back in early 2000s. Again, this was at the point where workshop teams were kind of hard to locate.
Yep.
So at that time, I think I had a few teams from Black Scorpion Miniatures. Fantastic. Also hand sculpted stuff. He's gotten out of doing them, and they periodically disappear and reappear. But I always thought they were like great little minis. But then right around when the pandemic rolled in, and I was working from home pretty constantly, and dealing with a lot of other random life stuff, I decided I should try sculpting. And from there, it really was. I sculpted some of my first terrible looking miniatures because, again, human anatomy is difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I
And
mean,
then
famously, even some of the greatest artists of all time have really struggled with, getting 5 fingers on a hand, for example.
yeah.
Those damn monkey shoulders.
Oh my god. It's one of those, and especially when you're trying to sculpt to a style that is inherently exaggerated, like the Games Workshop house style. So then I kind of sat down and thought, all right, am I really going to do this? Is it possible for me to spend a bunch of time and actually figure out how to sculpt when everything's kind of moving to digital and all that? And then I thought, Michael Perry was able to do this after he lost a hand in a cannon misfire, so I can probably manage it.
And is it? I mean,
Where did you get
what's
the
the
cannon?
base subject that you work in? Is it this green stuff I hear loads of things about? Is
It
that the?
That is my primary tool of use. I'll pull up the little. This is my little tower of putties that I mix together.
Okay.
So the top is just this is plastiline. So your basic, like, doesn't harden vegetable oil clay. Then
You
the
say you're basic. This is not part of my world at all. Let's be
Okay, so
very clear here. I have no idea what any of us are talking
okay,
about.
you know how if
Kindergarten?
like you were like a kid and you were playing with clay? Never did?
Let's go yes.
All right, yeah. So this is kind of like, it's kids clay. It's
Okay.
not, it doesn't
I
harden.
have
It
played
just
with
kind
my
of.
kids playing with clay, so that's.
Yes. Okay, that's good. Otherwise, I was about to bemoan the UK's support of the arts, which,
My youth was so long ago. I have no idea what went on there. Most of it was in black and white,
yeah,
and a lot of
understandable.
the adults from
It's
then are in jail now. So let's not go that far back. Let's talk about my
His
kids.
entertainment was fire.
They played
yeah,
with clay.
yeah, no. So yeah, and then the main substance I'm using is a two-part epoxy. It's called green stuff, also known as Kneadatite or Duro. It is manufactured in the United States of America.
Okay.
This is there's a whole long series of like confusing things, but it was originally brought over to the UK for Games Workshop. Uh, when they'd had some collaborations with U.S. sculptor Tom Meyer, and it was originally a putty that was used for repairing plumbing.
Right.
Yeah. So there's an single industrial company that makes it. That is where all green stuff comes from. Everybody's just repackaging it.
And someone in their sales office knows that 98% of their stuff goes to the plumbing market, but 2% goes to the hobbyists.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Back in the early 2000s, they reformulated it, and it lost some of the qualities that made it useful for sculpting.
Right.
So people, so you had, some of the professional sculptors of that era just, gathering together all these kinds of, all these packets that they could, until finally, I think there's a dedicated production line now that still does occasional runs of green stuff, but they don't do it that often.
Right. They
'Cause
choke the
it's
world's supply.
yeah, it's such a niche market.
I'm really
And
tempted
then
to make a Putin reference right now, but I'm not going to.
yeah, that's also behalf of the USA, hey, sorry we fucked this one up, guys.
It's ongoing, isn't it? I think it's
Yeah.
entertainment and drama, which isn't Blood Bowl. So let's move on. Politics
Yeah,
only gets in
sorry.
the way of things.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And then the bottom putty here is epoxy sculpt.
Right.
I'm just gonna say right now, if you don't have really fresh green stuff, it's miserable to work with.
So how do you keep it fresh, or does it
Oh,
need fridging? Is it like a live
yeah.
culture?
If you put it in your fridge, it'll slow the chemical reaction. I have a couple tubes of it in my freezer right now, so that I have a good stock.
Is it one of those ones that when it hits oxygen, it starts changing in nature?
A little bit. It starts oxidizing, and it loses some of the nice, like, bubblegum snap freshness that you can get with freshly made and stored green stuff.
Okay.
So if you look at like the old 1990s, Games Workshop tutorials, they're working with the fresh stuff. If you've had trouble with working with it, don't worry. That happens. It happens to everybody. So one of the tricks you can do is blend it with some different types of epoxy putties. I typically use a 50-50 mix of green stuff and AV's epoxy sculpt.
Okay, this was a question I was going to come around to when we had everyone in. So, Celaino, what epoxy do you use? Someone was very interested in asking you all what epoxies you rate.
Well, green stuff mostly, but also milliput, which is also a two-part epoxy resin. I don't know. I'm not technically
yeah, it's an epoxy, I think.
savvy enough. Yeah.
Okay.
And sometimes mixing both. So sometimes mixing a bit of milliput with your green stuff and try to have the best of both worlds.
They have different finishing properties.
Yeah, the green stuff tends to be more suitable for organic and free-flowing forms, and the milliput, you can sand it once it's hardened. You can have cleaner and sharper edges with it. So
that makes sense. So we're talking. I mean, this is something that really interests me here. We've gone from obviously wanting to create things in Blood Bowl into very much the world of art here. When we're talking about what finishes we have, I know that if I do this to this, then when it comes to the painting it and the cleaning it up, I will get this certain texture or this certain finish, or it will hold, paint or color in certain ways. Where's that line for you? What's more important? Is it the practicality of I'm doing something for Blood Bowl, or is it the art of what you do now? Are you now artists?
For me, it's pretty much 50-50.
Yeah, about the similar there.
Okay.
It's...
And where did you learn? Because, I'd have thought kitbashing, I'm the same. I go on, I will never paint. I'm more or less dyspraxic. I certainly don't have the hand-eye coordination to ever want to humiliate myself in that way. But obviously Facebook and Reddit largely exist so that people can show off things they've painted in the world of Blood Bowl. So every time I go on there, I see all these fantastic paintings, and almost everyone I see, I think that's fun. There's no way I could get anywhere near that. That's awesome. And you look at it, and I guess if you were painting, you could look and think, okay, so here's how I would try that. And that's how you get sucked in and drawn in. And I can see absolutely what Celaino's saying about, seeing other people doing some conversions and thinking that's something I think I've got the skill set for, and I can understand the basics, and I'll build a skill set as I go. And then sort of like skiing, I can see going off piste and saying, actually, now that I've built a few things for a piece, I might just build a piece. But there is a huge gap there in terms of, as you say, things like the human anatomy bit is done for Celaino. I'm sure there's times he's tried to convert things and gone, actually, that arm now looks, a foot too long or something. So there is an aspect, obviously, where he does have to understand all of that. But you, at some point, I mean, did you actually look at sort of anatomy books? Did you?
Oh yeah, I have a shelf full of anatomy books,
Right.
shelf full of like reference material, and because I'm really interested in again the older Games Workshop style sculpting and miniatures, because it really was an art form that they were, they essentially invented, and then with the advent of switching over to plastic sculpting, discarded. So it's a
Okay.
cool
Tell me more
snapshot.
about that. So what was the difference when they moved to plastic?
When they moved to plastics, much of what they were doing would, you know, it wouldn't be hand sculpted. There were some elements where, when they were using some of the initial sort of pantographic scanners to get, basically hand sculpted stuff scanned into 3D,
Right.
but, now most of it's kind of done digitally. But, back in the day, if you were creating a physical model, that means you have to create it at the size it's going to be used, and you have to design it in such a way that it can be placed in a mold and repeatedly cast and then shipped out to people.
Right.
Good old undercuts.
So all of the,
Yep.
you need to make sure that all of the, the bits that in the casting process can go wrong, that isn't going to happen. And so is that why
Yeah,
we're seeing much more dynamic poses? Is that resin and printing and 3D sculpting can make those happen more?
very much so. I will defer to Brutefun here on
Well, that's where we're going next,
anything.
obviously.
Yeah, anything related to 3D, because I've done a bit of 3D sculpting. I'm terrible at it.
So that was my next question. Is this now you're in the, you're fully immersed. You've done the research. You've got the bookshelf. You understand how humans and through iteration of that, orcs and dwarves and bull centaurs are going to be put together. Is it now the time to give up all of this, put all of that nerdy toys away, and just get yourself a computer?
Well, I do have a computer and I've done digital sculpting, but I mostly do physical because I got into this because, the names of some of the old sculptors who inspired me are people who are still working physically. Uh, I mean, one of my absolute idols and one of the people who, kind of pointed, okay, yeah, we've been here the entire time doing this kind of sculpting. Trish Carden, one of the original Games Workshop sculptors, Monster Girl Trish on Instagram. If you haven't somehow heard of her, she's done some of the most just gorgeous dragons and tree men, and for a while was doing all these monster sculpts. But she's still working traditionally, and it's tapping into that and tapping into the just physically creating a thing.
And have
That's
you
really
gone beyond
interesting to
Blood
me.
Bowl? Have you made dragons and elves and
Oh yeah,
wizards?
I've done a lot of stuff. I Blood Bowl is probably my first love in terms of sculpting, but I've done all sorts of weird genre stuff and non-Blood Bowl related minis.
Well, we're going to have a look through some galleries from you two in a bit, and also some of the lovely stuff from Brutefun. We've already heard from Brutefun, but hello, Brutefun. Nice to meet you.
Hello. Pleasure to be here.
As I said, when I asked who should I get on from the professional side of this, only two names came forward, and came forward in great numbers. And I'm absolutely thrilled that you've come to join us. And traditionally, as I always do when I've got a big name on, I talk to them last, to make people wait, because sod you all. I'm in charge. I decide. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Today I learned I'm a big name.
I think comparatively. I'm just going to let that be an awkward frisson silence because I love them too.
Yep.
So I've described already
that discomfort. It's fine.
Celaino as striking up his great big doobie behind the bike sheds, whereas Hedningen is fully in the multi-story car park shooting up the heroin. Are you the dealer? Have you taken this into a professional world where you are the great evil one? And are you destroying them all with your electronic warfare? Are you the future?
Maybe. Well, it's that to Hedningen's point with regards to, or the question you were asking with regards to if they wanted to go digital or not.
Yeah.
It's what's the goal of the sculpting, right? And so, and for me, I happened into this accidentally, really.
And is this your slope? Did you come from the Blood Bowl world, or did you come straight into the 3D world of sculpting and through computing?
So I came through Blood Bowl. I've always been artistically inclined, drawing since I could hold a pencil, and did a little bit of like actual physical sculpting, with, like clay and stuff, but always never finished a piece, like an actual physical sculpture. It was always just something I'd kind of do while watching TV or whatever.
Right.
And then when the lockdowns happened, I had converted. So really where I started was with conversion.
See, Celaino, this is your future I'm showing you here.
I don't think so.
That's where I started to tumble. Back when I was playing Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer 40K, for me, I've always like, okay, this is a cool model, and then maybe a little bit of arrogance in it is like, I can make it better, and then go from there. Or it's like, okay, this is cool, but it would be cooler this way. And so yeah, it started with like chopping up, and then you necessarily will pick up a bit of sculpting there just to fill in the gaps. When you've cut off half the arm, well, I now have to sculpt the rest of the arm that's missing.
Okay.
So you start there, then basically get a little bit more ambitious. So now it's not just filling in the gaps that I've created, which is still like you can mentally kind of trace the gap there. So it's less freeform, and it's more or less like connecting the dots
Yeah.
at that point. And then as well, oh well, there's this big flat surface here. Let me just freeform some details. So for example, like Grey Knights was my army of choice for 40K because very low model count.
Right.
Means light on the wallet. But they have a significant amount of just like flat areas, so especially for characters, and I tend to like what my part of my creative process, or like to where I'll get ideas for anything, it's I will give a model a story, and that will help inform how that model like will be posed, what details will go up on it. It's
So we're talking a story. I mean, what a name or who they are, or what their task is, how they live, how they do
or
their
at
job. Or...
some of that, at its basic would be more just a kind of a short like narrative sentence, like I don't know, like a grizzled veteran, and then go from there, and then like, okay, what can I represent? What can I put on this model to represent that he's seen some shit, or anything like that, and then go from there.
Okay,
So
so
it's not.
there's the inspiration. So now what you model? I mean, we've all heard of Brutefun, as I said. If you go on Etsy, if you go on YouTube, on eBay, and if you're looking for models, brute stuff Brutefun stuff would have been there in your mind, if not already in your collection. Where does that come from now? Do you physically sculpt them and scan them, or is it all 3D? And how was that process converting?
So it's all digital, and this happened during the lockdown. So where I started with the whole conversion thing, I'd converted some Blood Bowl teams, and at some point I'd messed up one of the models that I'd worked on, but I only noticed it after I painted it, and it was bothering me. And so, on a laugh, and because lots of free time, I decided to download. I downloaded a free program online called Blender, which is a full 3D suite software. Like you can make movies with this,
Right.
but it's free and open source. So like, all right, I downloaded it, and then I kind of just started to poke and prod. This was in 2021, or in the middle of the lockdowns, and the whole point was just to, instead of going online and trying to buy the pieces, like just the bits to remake the model that I'd messed up, I'd be like, okay, well, let me sketch it out first, essentially 3D, or can I? And then there was also, again, just that little bit of arrogance to it of, could I also make it better? Or can I, like now that I have like free form, I'm not going to be limited to the bits of plastic that are already molded. What can I do with it? So that's how I started. I just kind of poked and prodded with the software. Luckily, Blender was I found it to be fairly intuitive, cranked out in the sense of the first model I ever sculpted was a big orc, black orc, kind of in a blitzing pose, and then I was pretty happy with it, and I posted it online on Reddit. At which point, the comments I was getting was like, "Where can I buy this?" I'm like, "Well, I wasn't planning on selling it. Well, I didn't even know." So it's like, yeah, you mentioned you don't know, you don't even know what an STL is. I didn't either at the time.
Right.
So, anyways, I had a little bit of interest. I was like, "Oh, I'd like to buy this." So I'm like, "Okay, well, I'll consider it." Then I made a troll that was, well, more to my liking, more reminiscent of a fantasy football, and not like obscure details with an arm right across the face. So I made a troll, and then I posted that, and then the requests for purchase became aggressive.
Right.
And that's when I was like, okay, well, then I literally just asked, okay, well, I'm happy to sell it. Is there a place I can sell this? So they pointed me to Cults 3D initially, and that's pretty much how this started.
Because mostly, as I understand it, you sell the digital files to people who then
Yes.
print them and sell them through places like Etsy, competing
Yes.
with each other. So very often there's 4 or 5 people selling all your sculpts, and the differences in the P&P and things.
Right. So that came about because I have there's a couple reasons, but so mainly I don't have the patience or the time for like the actual logistics of sending out physical things into the world, right? So
Sure.
like printing and shipping and all that. But then also early on, and one of the things I kind of realize is, and this is not like a knock on anybody that does the printing or anything like that, but these are things that anybody can be trained to do.
Yeah.
So the one thing that is uniquely me I can bring here is the actual sculpting.
The actual
So
sculpting
anything
and the
I can
design.
do
Yeah.
that just leaves me open to do that, and everything else can be outsourced in a sense.
Yeah. And it allows you to focus and concentrate on the bit you enjoy, and then also where your skill set is.
Exactly, and that's because anytime I'm spending printing, supporting, shipping, well, I'm not making anything new.
So,
So
do you still enjoy it? Is it still a fun hobby now that it's also a work stream?
very much, there's ups and downs for anything, but it's still ultimately the best job I've ever had by far. And like the hard days, it's always good to kind of remind myself like you make toy soldiers for a living. Like it's chin up.
And how
Could be
much of that? I
worse.
mean, and is it now your living? Is it now what you do?
Very much so, yeah.
And is it just in Blood Bowl, or are you heading outside as well?
Yeah, my passion for now is very much in generic, legally distinct fantasy football. Yes.
Yes, sorry. They've never come after me, and I talk about the word Blood Bowl all the time, so I presume we're safe here.
You're not selling anything.
I'm not selling anything. I don't monetize this in any way. I know I did. I sold some dice, didn't I? To pay for
Yeah.
a dinner for my lovely wife. Still available on eBay. I
But
still sell a couple every month.
for now, yes, mainly because it's in a sense it's important. It's my current source of inspiration because people have always asked me, it's like, oh, maybe you could put some weapons on these, and realistically, I should. There's no reason why I don't. There's no reason why I shouldn't. The main reason just ends up being like I don't. Blood Bowl is the only game I play, so it's the only game I'm intimately familiar with, and that's something I try to bring with whatever I put out too. Is that they will,
I mean,
function
to all of you, do you
within.
think that understanding and passion for Blood Bowl is a key part of you doing a good job at sculpting and modelling within the world of Blood Bowl?
100%.
Celaino?
Yeah, probably. I did some conversion work as well for Necromunda, which is also another Games Workshop game. And that's usually weapon swaps and head swaps and when you have a whole gang, you want to avoid having twice the same model, so having the exact same pose over and over again. So but maybe that's also knowing the game and playing the game is also useful in order to
Yeah,
make
you
a
see,
good
instantly
conversion or
you've
something
revealed the
that.
knowledge of why this is happening, which surely helps inform how you do it and why you're doing it, doesn't it?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Like I can bring it like so in the realm of making miniatures for like fantasy arrayed battle line games, or especially if they have any kind of rule where it's what you see is what you get. Well, if I'm not familiar with the rules, I can make a really cool model that has an assortment of war gear that would not be possible within those rules.
Yeah, which is going to
Right.
bother
Okay.
some people, some nerds, isn't it?
I
Now,
think the term is rivet counters.
I dread that. Well, actually,
yes, defenders of the fluff, like it matters. I've said before, I don't care if Games Workshop says the plural of Saurus is Saurus. It's a made-up world and a made-up word. The plural can be Saurai, it can be Sauruses, it can be Suriki. It can be whatever you choose it to be because it's all made up. Sue me. I will stand by that until I die. Where do we stand on the modelling? First of all, how do we all feel about Games Workshop's current release of models? I mean, I liked the Black Horse, for example, and lots of people told me they liked the gnome figures. Are they doing good sculpting now? Do they have good figures coming out?
They
I do think
are,
so.
yeah, they are without a doubt probably the best producers of plastic in the world, and their design team, especially the Specialist Games design team, is fantastic.
Brutefun, do you
I
rate them?
have I have so generally my point of contentions to them tends to be just more stylistic choice, but as far as execution goes, or it's always neat to find to just, and that's where I'll look at anybody else's work too, just seeing how they solve certain problems within a model. So a good example for me is like I like how Games Workshop does chainmail, for example, because I've tried my hand at chainmail a few times, and it's a pain in the ass. However, but it also doesn't end up translating all that well to a miniature that's 2 inches tall.
Yeah, I
If
mean,
you do it like
I
proper
understand from my
form.
world. I mean, in the world of acting, I've worn chainmail several times, and
I-
one time when I was wearing actual chainmail, I got a lot of comments saying the chainmail didn't look real, which is the only time I've worn actual real chainmail. Whereas when I've worn a woolen jumper artfully coloured by the costume department, it often looks much better from that distance that a stage needs to be as chainmail. So
Silver,
sometimes it's about
silver.
what reads, isn't it? Not what's real.
Well,
It's
exactly.
the exact same thing with the heroic scale.
Well, I wanted to get onto
Oh,
this.
So
All right, you've raised it. Let's
Yeah.
talk the heroic scale. So I was introduced to this. For those of you out there that aren't aware, the question seems to largely centre around how big is your head? So how big should
and
someone's head be? I just want one answer to that question, then we'll talk about why that question exists in the first place.
All right.
Hedningen, how big should
well,
someone's head be?
Depending on the game system, well, I mean, the cheeky answer is each head should be one head large because proportions are typically measured in heads. But
Yes.
yeah, I'd say for what we do, 1/5 of the total body size.
Okay. Celaino, how big should a head be?
well, if you go by the pure artistic theory, it's 1/7, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
But
No,
miniatures are
I noticed you
never
put your
made.
hand up. That's a famous. The size of a person's hand is roughly the size of a face, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a very large head.
But
Yours quite
the
small,
whole
but it's
point
more or less the same.
in miniatures is that you look at something that is really small, and it has to read and has to come across as looking nice or
should.
being able to paint it is also a topic. If it's too small, it's already a bit tedious to paint eyes as it is with heroic scale. So if it were a true scale miniature, then it's impossible to paint the eyes.
Brutefun, how big should a head
come
be?
up with
So
Sorry,
anatomically speaking, body is about 7 heads tall. 6.5 to 7 is how the height of most people. Artistically, 7 to 7.5. When you start getting into 8 heads tall, then you're looking at like model proportions, and then you have heroic, which are up to 9 heads tall. For miniatures, Games Workshop goes with about 4 heads tall for their minis.
So Games
I
Workshop
go
miniatures
for
have
about
huge
5.
blown up heads, and you have
Yeah,
about 5.
yeah. I usually go for about 5.
So Celaino, explain to me, I'm sorry for cutting you off, explain to me the heroic scale that we've been talking around before I let anyone explain it.
Oh yeah, it's blowing up the head and the hands and certain features of the body and making them impossibly large compared to the real scale of human beings.
It's about creating points of interest.
Yeah, basically.
So until this was pointed out to me, I foolishly had looked at my figures and thought those are sculpted like humans. But you're now telling me I'm completely wrong and none of them are.
Correct.
Yep.
That if I saw one in actual human scale, it would have a little tiny pinhead and little miniature hands I could hardly see.
You'd be looking at, honestly, kind of someone that would have dwarfism in real life as far as proportion goes.
Wow. Okay, I see. But that's what we're used to seeing, and that's, as you say, where the details are, where the eye is drawn, and where the focus is on these miniatures. Okay, that's interesting. So another change I noticed, and you've talked about this already, is from the Blood Bowl I grew up with. Now, the very first Blood Bowl set I've got has the little cardboard shapes that you put into slot bases. But the second edition, which I didn't actually play, I have seen. And from then on, it seems that the standard Blood Bowl pose, I've just pushed back slightly. I know those of you listening won't be seeing that. But is standing upright, head in some direction, looking forward to the ball, hands on hips, legs firmly planted slightly apart. I'm a Blood Bowl player about to play Blood Bowl, or if I'm an elf, one of my arms or both might be up like that. We've moved. Was anything wrong with a world where we had 12 of those? Those of us with imagination still gave each one personality. But then you converters came along and converted them or kitbashed them into more interesting shapes. And suddenly we saw, what about if my 11 players were all different? How cool would that be? Which I guess is why we're all here tonight.
Yeah.
But hasn't Games Workshop gone too far? We've already talked about the arm in front of the face as you throw a troll. That troll is also stood seemingly on 3 toenails.
Yeah.
There are dwarves connected to their base by 3 beard hairs. Now, I don't paint, I don't convert, I don't do any of these things, but even I look at those and think, someone's got really pissed off with the number of times that's broken before they've managed to get it right, and they've had to pin it in place several times. The same with the rat tails. I love me some rat tails, but my goodness, they look breakable. Where are you all on the scale of that? How much do you consider the practicality when you convert or sculpt or digitally create things? How much are you thinking this has to be rolled over by people, painted by people? They have to be able to hold it as they paint it. Are you looking at points of contact and stability? I guess that's my question.
I'll leave others to answer that one first because that falls into like commercial success for me. So
sure, okay. So we'll come to the pimp, the pusher last. Let's start with the users. Hedningen, do you consider this stuff?
Oh, or Celaino, if you want to go first, go for it.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. These are gaming pieces. That's what they're meant to be. If it's on the field, it is representing something, and the 3 main goals are it has to be strong enough that people can play with it and use it for all the stuff that'll happen in a normal game. The models themselves have to have distinct silhouettes so you can tell the difference between what each position is. Because I'm sure everybody's had the issue of that's why I really dislike the first Plastic Humans team, or the modern Plastic Humans team that Workshop does, where the difference between some of the linemen and some of the blitzers are just the size of the little hat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Give them,
the little crest.
give them 2 wings
Yeah.
on the helmet. Give them spikes on the shoulders. Give me something
Yeah.
I can see from distance.
Or even something like I consider the peak of sort of Blood Bowl's usability and readability to be the 3rd edition Gary Morley sculpts. He kind of defined the line, and you can see the classic Gary Morley poses here.
Yeah. So
It is
it's what we think of as the last sort of great metal editions from Games Workshop, isn't it?
yeah, sort of the last great metal editions, and I adore his house style and just a delightful fellow. But yeah, it's you have to consider that, and especially if if I'm sculpting something physically, I'm gonna think about how it's balancing, because I have to balance it while I'm working on it.
But wasn't he also the chip in the dam? Because it was the Orc Blitzers on that sort of team, it was the Dark Elf Blitzers that suddenly had more dynamism than all of those players
Yeah.
just stood there. And
Oh,
perhaps we all suddenly
absolutely.
looked at those and thought, well, why don't all my players look like they're actually doing something?
Yeah. No, and he managed that dynamism in a way that still had the team balance, and I
And
think
as you said,
it's
could still be moulded and made and sent out at
yeah,
reasonable quality.
yeah, exactly. And it's no longer. I adore the 2nd edition sculpts. The 2nd edition halflings are almost unplayably small.
They are tiny.
Look,
They're the size of snotlings.
Yeah.
yeah,
The size of a modern snotling, yes. And of course,
Skill
even the
creep.
dynamic ones there were all on one plane. So you'll notice there were people doing exciting things, but it was all in one line.
Yeah.
So that
And
it
that's
could be
the
nicely moulded.
The molding
the
process.
realities of a 2-part mold. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the fact that he got that much dynamism in within those restrictions, I do think was incredible, and the start of us seeing, players could actually look like they were playing the game, as well as readable for what they were doing.
Yeah.
But now we can move in 3 directions. So now we can have pieces that have a leg out going backwards and 2 arms going sidewards and half a ghoul on a shoulder and an uneaten dwarf in their mouth.
And not worry about alignments of a mold splitting apart.
Yeah.
So you don't have
Is it better
undercuts.
though? And are we actually getting overcomplicated figures? Celaino, I've got a nod. Brilliant. Join me in the
Yeah, of course.
Luddite. Let's go back to just printed metal.
No, but when you talk about the 3rd edition being the last metal edition, I think that some of the 2nd edition sculpts were even better than the 3rd edition. When I see the 2nd edition elves from Jess Goodwin, and not only did he do the elves in Blood Bowl, but also all the Eldar and the Harlequins in 40k, they are such wonderful models. That some of them didn't in 40k, some of the models that he made 35 years ago were never updated until now in recent plastics. I'm talking about the warp spiders, for example. And they're still great. They're still the only issue they have is that the size has been increasing. So the size creep has been so huge that indeed the halflings are snotling size now. And even the 3rd edition Morley orcs are tiny compared to the current plastic editions. But yeah, to come back to your question, I think that the sculpt, standing on the 2 toes, hanging by the beard on the base and stuff like that, and some of the really, for me, confusing the Wilhelm Scheney or the werewolf one doesn't look right to me. But that's maybe because I'm old and I'm used to.
But then you look at every model and think, how do I make
to
this better? So presumably you are looking for faults you can convert and change.
Yeah, but I don't. Again, I'm converting for myself, so I'm looking at what do I have and how do I make my models better, and for the whole practicality.
But you can still have that view of for the hobby. I think this is the new Creek Rust Gouger. There's something about his front teeth I don't like, and one of his hands is sort of weirdly huge. that model doesn't really hold together for me. But I do think Games Workshop are in the main are pretty solid. Hedningen, how do you feel about this? About the
Uh,
modern world of
j-
sculpts and where we're at?
oh yeah, no, they're great. I think modern sculpting is fantastic. Although I thought I answered it.
Yeah. So okay.
Eh,
So Brutefun, we've been holding off on
yeah,
you because, as you said, this is
yeah.
partly your
I don't
living.
want to. I don't want to take
I
away
just want to
from
make sure
his
you
time.
both had some time before we head into Brutefun, talking to me
Oh,
about,
absolutely.
because obviously it's you versus them now. Now I remember some savage orcs that caught everyone's attention, and a lovely Croxicle, which, as we've said, I have in my collection. I mean, I think one of the things that first drew my eye to your stuff was just how dynamic they were. Solid-looking pieces that didn't look like they'd break, but still in action, still very much doing things, and with a real strong look to them. Do you feel Games Workshop are catching you up?
Well, I mean, the Games Workshop has been doing a lot more dynamic sculpts for a while now, especially in their like bigger models, right? Like their big war beasts and stuff back in Warhammer Fantasy Age of Sigmar. Um, but they're making more dynamic models mainly because I think they just figured out. Well, they've gotten way more clever with how they hide seams. But you also end up with more. Then you'll end up with something like the Dark Elf team, where somehow you have to glue a thumb onto a Witch Elf,
Mhm.
right? So there's that problem, which luckily I get to avoid because of how 3D printing works.
Yeah.
But well, the to go back to the difference between like the newer style of models versus the old one is more of a fundamental, or it depends on how you see stuff like Blood Bowl or Warhammer, or do you see it as a board game or a miniatures game? If you're seeing it as a board game, then all your pieces being kind of static, looking all the same, that's better, I find. Much clearer, much more readable, kind of just gets the point across. As soon as you start dipping into, well, this is a miniatures game, then it starts to become about the miniatures. And then that's where for me, it's I've always seen Blood Bowl, Warhammer, all that. It's miniatures first, like it's those cool little guys on the table, and
Interesting.
then the rules are just there for me to use the cool little guys.
I mean, as someone that came from the computer version and then went tabletop,
Yeah,
I don't know where I am on that entirely. I guess I see it as a game, and I do think of them as game pieces.
and
But I like my
it's not
game
wrong
pieces to
either
be
way,
pretty.
right? And so like with regards to then when it comes to like the design and things that they've touched on, that others have touched on with regards
Yeah.
to the human team as an example of like, okay, what's the difference between your lineman and the blitzer? One has a slightly bigger crest. Okay, cool. Oh, I blitzed the blitzer. I didn't realize that was a blitzer and it has block, and now I'm screwed. Or the other, for me, one of the more egregious things that Games Workshop has done recently on that front would be the Amazon team, where their strength 4 piece is smaller than everybody else on the team.
Yeah, I did think they were going to come out looking chunky, and they just didn't, did they?
Now, a lot of it has to do with the pose, and then this goes into the whole process of when I'm making miniatures of like, okay, what is this? And this is where like the intimate knowledge of whatever game I'm making pieces for comes in of what is this piece meant to do. So like for a kind of blocker, like a big strength piece, then I don't want it to look smaller. I want it to look big. I want it to be clear, or as clear as possible at a glance that okay, like this is a bigger problem than this one, or like, oh, this is the fast piece because it's running, as opposed to this is the punchy piece because it's big and it looks mean.
Yes, I mean,
So that
I can't pretend this doesn't matter to me. Some people on Fumble use a setting that they don't even use the icons. They have these coloured circles.
right,
And I guess that's the
and
ultimate taking it to the board game level. To me,
exactly.
that makes no sense. I can't see what's going on without the little icons.
That's playing Blood Bowl with different colored meeples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess even with on tabletop, I've long said that, as long as they pass whatever the tournament organizer says, I don't care about my pieces. But I've now got a beautifully painted vampire team, a fantastically painted Chaos Dwarf team, and some other teams that people have painted for me. So I really value them for those reasons, even if they're less eye-catchingly wonderful. And I noticed the other day, my Dark Elves, I've got the very old edition metal Dark Elves because they're just so much nicer than the modern ones. The modern ones are okay, but I love the old ones.
They've
And
lost a lot of identity.
what I've done is I've glued them on top of 32mm bases on their old bases.
Yeah.
And that now means they're the same height as a modern piece. And it turned out
Scale
that
creep is
really
great.
did bother me. It wasn't just fitting the skill rings on, which was the original idea. But it was now when they're on the board and they're standing next to someone's modern piece, they're the same sort of size. And it turns out I was getting a big inferiority complex about everyone else's pieces towering over me. So I guess there is something about the look that even comes from playing aspect like me does still care about. How much would you say that? Where's that line for you? Do you sit down opposite a team and you're more interested in oh, hang on, this is really interesting. What have they done there? Or in playing the game? Where in actual Blood Bowl, are you still looking constantly at the pieces and the sculpting and the options, or
So
is
before and
that
after,
parked? Yeah.
yeah. So for me, before and after, model focus. Once the game's on, then the game is on. But I'm very much interested, especially when they're setting up. So again, because
Agreed.
I like the models, and I like models that tell a story or that I capture, that kind of grab a snapshot.
Okay. A lot of the questions I've been asking, because I do swear I know nothing here. I am making this up, and even some of the sounds I'm making are empty. I don't know what they mean. So I do need to thank Ragnir too, who on Reddit gave me some lovely questions to ask, and he's going to give me a set of 4 things he wants you to rank in order of importance. So I'm going to read them out, and then as soon as someone thinks they've got them in an order they're happy to stick to, let me know. When you sculpt, convert, or kitbash, which of these do you prioritize and in what order? Dynamic posture, which we've talked about. Durability, which we've talked about. Paintability, which I guess we've covered a bit in terms of surfaces and things, but ultimately someone's got to put a little brush on these and turn them into the beautiful things we end up giving awards to. And we've covered this a little bit too, but the readability of the miniature. When some old bugger with glasses like me is sat 5 foot away and trying to look across the table, how important is it to you that I can see what's where? And of those 4 factors, many of which we've touched on, what order would you put them in? Which is brutally awful, because the answer is obviously all 4 at once, like a gorgeous web
Yeah.
upon which we all float. But I'm not asking you to do that. I've been asked to get you to rank them in order, so I'm going to argue about you rank them in order. What of those 4, any of you got a top 1 yet?
Readability.
Same.
Okay.
It's
Yeah, I tend to agree with it.
I was going to say, you're not
If
allowed
you
to
can't-
disagree now because you look like an outlier, a renegade.
I
No one wants
have my
that.
4 in order already.
Yeah.
Okay,
Same
well,
here.
we'll go to Brutefun. There was a big, bold
Yeah.
statement. Let's have them.
So yeah, so readability, then paintability for me. Bisca's commercial,
Sure.
I do so, but also because those 2 will inform, and then structure, so durability, and then posability basically ends up taking the back seat because it's going to be informed by all the other 3.
And has there been times you've given up a good pose thinking that looks great, but it just won't work for X reason?
Yep. Plenty of times, and there's plenty of times where I went for a pose, and then through feedback, especially with a lot of the earlier work, I was like, yeah, this looks great. This is ass to paint.
Okay.
Right, and so this was noted. Better luck on the next run.
Because presumably it's lots of word of mouth. It's people going, look, this was it's a beautiful piece and I loved
Oh.
painting it. That's what sells the next one.
I'm very open to if something works, happy to find. If something doesn't work, again, nobody likes to take criticism on, but I'm not. I've noted.
Now,
Keep that in
as
mind.
always, in the
especially if
YouTube
it's gone
and the
before.
WhatsApp, in the YouTube and the podcast, whichever you get your podcast from, wherever I can put notes, I do, and I will put links to things like Brutefun's Discord, and anyone's files are out there that you can go and have a look at all of this stuff. So some of this will be available to you, and I believe you do sometimes, have discussions on your Discord and even Sculpt live on the Discord and stuff.
Sculpt live, not so much, mainly because I don't have the bandwidth mentally for sculpting while
Sure.
talking or discussing. But I post work in progress pieces, and I will often just because I'll have because I'm sculpting mostly for myself, but I will also acknowledge it's sometimes I have shit ideas. So I will put it out. It's like, well, this is what I'm thinking, or I'll have, or even sometimes it's because I can't make up my mind. I'll have two options in my head, and I'll make them both. I'm like, okay, which one works best? At the end of the day, you all are going to be paying me for this, so.
And have people ever taken the wrong choice? Have you ever done something for money that artistically you thought was the wrong choice?
No, because I've set myself up for that to not be. I do not have a problem. So I was like, if I'm not going to. If I'm putting it up for a choice, it's because I don't know if there's a right choice.
Okay.
Is simply put. Because otherwise, I'm very much like, no, this is how it is.
Other guys, Celaino, Hedningen, do you disagree with the order the Brutefun put them in at all, or have we sorted that now?
I'd say pretty well sorted.
No,
on
I'm
mine.
quite happy. I'm quite happy with the sorting. But then again, I'm painting my own conversions, so I don't have the.
He has an audience of one.
Yeah, they're for you.
Yeah.
But surely once you've done them, don't you want to put them on Reddit or Facebook and get 5 people clicking like and 3 people saying I could have done it better?
I should actually, but yeah, no, maybe it's a bit something of a shyness, or I like to take them out. I like to take them on a tournament and having people look at it and say like, "Ooh, what's that? Where does that come from?" But no, maybe I should think about
A
putting
shy
something
artist, what a
Instagram
beautiful
or
and
whatever.
rare thing. Half the point of doing any form of art is showing off and getting the warm applause of others.
Yeah.
It says the actor, so trust me, that's entirely why I do it. Originally, it was
Humble,
the
too.
first thing we did joint with the local girls' school. That may have determined my entire life. What would be your 3 biggest mistakes that you've learnt from? Let's assume that some people out there in this world that play Blood Bowl are tempted to try this sort of nonsense that you 3 are involved in, either by directly taking on the corporate giant that is Brutefun, or by gently converting some things, as Celaino is, or maybe thinking, do you know what, I could sculpt either online or in the real world. Either way, what would be 3 things they could learn from, 3 mistakes you've made that you would say, do this or don't do this, or learn from my wisdom here?
3 basic things that
Yeah.
I always want to say. Always work with reference material, physical pictures, or especially for sculpting miniatures, have a model in the size that you want to work with, because that's going to show you, hey, this is kind of how these things look, and if I want it to look close together, that's biggest thing I could say to anyone starting out.
Allow yourself to be informed by the work of others directly as you do it.
Absolutely. If I may get pretentious for a moment,
Sure.
even the seminal text on sculpting and modeling the human figure, Lanteri's gorgeous book, he goes, all right, if you're going to learn sculpting, what you need to do is sit down with a bust of Michelangelo's David and work following and learning those proportions.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Except
then
the
the
cock's
introduction.
too small. But the rest of it,
yeah.
I absolutely sign off. I've seen that live. Fantastic bit of sculpture. But I do think the average cock is bigger than that.
Good artist. Sorry, it's good artists borrow, great artists steal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those great things. None of us get to where we are without standing on the shoulders of smarter, wiser people that came before us. And I think it's foolish to pretend otherwise. So it's great to be really upfront about that and learn from others openly and brutally. Steal,
And I'm
take, and let it inform you. Brutefun.
I'm gonna. Well, it says they had 2 more to go through, but just putting a pin because I will come back to specifically that point of.
Okay. Hedningen, anything
Work
else?
at the
Any other
size you're
mistakes to
making.
learn from that you've made?
Don't compare yourself to other artists too much. Everybody's working on art in their own way. And, if you're going to be sitting there saying, oh, I could never get started, or I couldn't try this because somebody else is already doing this so perfectly, then no one would ever bother. So almost a little different than the first set, but it's, social media provides this huge distortion of these, gorgeously sculpted miniatures coming out of nowhere. And you think, oh, that must be what everyone else is doing all the time. And no, it really is just kind of, you got to spend a bunch of time making a lot of really silly, weird models up until the point where, it's like, okay, yeah, this is pretty good.
And you don't get to see those people's weird, silly models because they don't post them.
Yeah, those ones they don't
Exactly.
show off. Yeah, they keep them
Yeah.
in a big dark locker somewhere where they don't even look at them themselves. Okay. Anything else in terms of mistakes to learn from or pitfalls to avoid?
For the love of God, sculpt women with different body types. Please, just
So as long as they're
it's
thin and have slender hips and long legs, they can have either small breasts or large ones. That's what you're saying.
apparently, yeah,
Exactly.
that's exactly how it goes. And sorry, it's one of my personal points where I I would love to see someone make an Amazon team that doesn't just make me sigh a little bit inside and go, see, this is why more women aren't playing this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for anyone that couldn't tell, that was irony. I've got 20 years of complaining about, even on Fumble, the images people wanted to use for their player cards for their Amazons. 20 years ago, I was saying, no, why are all these women in underwear or less? This is not appropriate for a family-based site. It's not appropriate for this game. It's also not appropriate for women doing sport.
Yeah.
Other
Look
than
at a
the one
roller derby team.
exploitative, yeah, other than the exploitative underwear league in America, mostly when women play sport, they do so in suitable athletic clothing, and they have athletic builds.
Yeah. I
I got
mean,
very depressed. I personally am a big fan, it's been said on the show before, of the Exit 23, I think they're called.
you showed me
Zenobian
those.
Zeniths. They are a sort of Mad Max futuristic modern team post-apocalypse, which I would much rather they weren't. But at least I think the mold models on them, the sculpts, as you said, there are different types of body represented, different sizes and shapes, and none of them look like they belong in any sort of porn mag, which
Yeah.
to me is an absolute basic. But
Yeah.
I think the Games Workshop we've got better.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, some of the other third-party things are still, I think, shameful. But hey, it's a very male-orientated hobby, and that may be why. It may be one of the barriers we need to drop before we change that.
Yeah. I mean, I still gotta, sit down and, gather some friends from roller derby and ladies rugby leagues and then just use them as my models for this.
Yeah, I mean, I always remember, and there's been, I mean, look at Venus Williams. You can't
Yeah.
tell me that isn't an incredibly attractive-looking woman, but she's very definitely got a powerful build, an athletic body shape. I don't see why we don't celebrate that. I don't see why everyone has to look like a porn star or a Victoria's Secret model. I think that's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
It's
Brutefun.
frustrating.
Would have been a perfect strength for Amazon.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's have the Williams sisters as the strength for Amazons, or at least just women of that shape, of which some women are. I
Yeah.
mean, I shouldn't talk about my sister, but very attractive woman. She's always been built like a Valkyrie. Now, when I say that to her, I say it as praise. Does she hear it as praise? No. Oh no. But I did mean it originally as praise. I will go to my grave saying that. She's never forgiven me and never will.
Yeah.
Um, Brutefun, what have you learnt? What mistakes did you make on your roll to corporate dominance of the Blood Bowl 3D printing world?
Um, for a first piece of advice for me is always like sculpt what you like and start there.
Okay.
Uh, because well, if you get started because inspiration. So again, sculpt what you like, and don't really. So sculpt for yourself first, then you can start worrying about sculpting for other people. And then in the sense too of reference, uh, like reference, steal, borrow, like look, copy, whatever it is, especially when you're starting, because you will develop style yourself just from the simple fact that your brain will interpret things different than somebody else.
Hmm.
So just by the simple process of you importing information,
Yes, the fact
you're
that
going to change
it's
it.
you doing it, meaning that you will be
Exactly.
part of that process.
But and then there's the whole idea is like, okay, if somebody's already made a trail, you don't have to go start chopping through the bush. Use the trail that's already there. it's fine. You can go off the path a little bit afterwards once you've got some comfort. But yeah, so that's be the first one of this. Like, sculpt what you like and copy.
Yeah.
Like, simple as in. And
I
again,
love that
don't
expression.
worry.
Start on the path. And once you get used
Right.
to walking through the woods, then you can maybe find your own path.
Exactly. The other and in that same, and basically in the same analogy, is like, do not look for shortcuts initially, because if you learn to do something through a shortcut, you'll get lost when it stops working.
Good shout.
So
Okay, some
that, 'cause
great advice.
I'm
Celaino,
incredibly
let's
guilty
bring
of
you
that
in.
one.
They've taken the easiest route. You've got to find 3 new things to say that aren't those.
3 new things.
Or you can just agree. That's fine. I am taking the piss.
I mostly agree. That's not an issue. I would say just do it. There are, especially with kitbashing or with converting right now, plastics are such an easy material to cut and to reposition and to use. And there are lovely kits made already, so not that easy to combine different kits, to cut an arm, to cut a hand, to slightly reposition a leg. So just try and do it. If you're more adventurous and you're going to cut up 1980s minis, just do it as well. Some of the minis I've used, well, I've been declared mad for cutting them up and say, like, do you know how valued this mini is, or how rare or how sought after it is? And I said, well, I don't care. It's in my bid box. I don't use it for anything else. I will cut it up and I will make something out of it.
Don't tell me it's one of those
yours.
legendary missing cheerleaders or one of the original little tiny Chaos Dwarves.
No, that's not up to that point. But yeah, some of the Warhammer minis where people said to me, like, okay, this is old stuff. Okay, but I happen to have one lying in my bid box, and I happen to have a great idea to use it for my Renegades team. So let's just do it. Don't shy away from feedback. Show wherever you are in your journey. Show the minis to friends, to people that sculpt as well, or just people that play the game and say, like, how does it look to you?
Exactly. So we're heading into this. This is the next question. I'll be coming back around the group with, what are the inspirational moments? What advice? What do you get? Where should you go looking? What should you be watching on YouTube, etc., etc. So any advice to help people move forward in this, including you've talked a little bit of time about your little tiny hacksaws and drills. Where would I get those?
Where did I get mine? I don't remember. It's been such a long time. Pin vices, for example, Games Workshop used to sell them, but at a inflated price, like they sell everything at an inflated price. But most DIY stores, you have all the tools that you need: pin vices, X-Acto knives, jeweler saws. Don't buy your pin vices and green stuff at Games Workshops. That's everything.
Yeah, so any
People
kind of
pay-
like local friendly gaming store will generally have that kind of stuff there. Amazon is always where you can get everything else.
Are they going to look at you in a strange way when you ask for that? They're going to be like, oh, you're one of them. Let me take you to the dark corner where we keep the sculpting stuff.
It's usually just with the painting stuff.
Yeah.
So it is.
And
It's
it's
the part of the
also-
store I don't go to. I knew that's why I
Yeah.
didn't know it was there.
It's also, sometimes you especially for physical sculpting, you make your own tools out of stuff.
Okay. I mean, presumably you need like
Arts and crafts.
little picks and scrapers and things.
The dental picks, a set of dental picks will carry you a long way.
Oh yeah, and then it's about practicing with the tool and getting familiar with it. There's not one magic tool that suddenly makes it so you can sculpt.
Cool.
The only magic tool you have are your hands. Anything you can sculpt directly with your fingers is going to turn out way better than anything you can do with a tool.
Now, have you ever thought, what am I doing something this tiny for? It would be much
Here's
easier. Oh yeah, cool.
Like
Yeah,
dental
little
pick.
dental tool. Yeah.
And this is my current favorite tool. This is a Taranti Wax number 5. that I have specifically because I'm trying to do old style recreations, because this was the in-house sort of general sculpting tool that they used at Games Workshop back in the day. And I am
Knife
one of
hand
those.
and a spatula end.
Yeah.
It's like when Tarantino uses stock from the 1930s film or something.
Yeah. Basically, it's the wow, that's incredibly pretentious. It's a bit of metal.
If it makes you happy, that's the whole point of a hobby, isn't it?
Yeah,
And the thing, like
exactly.
if
We
you
need-
got a hammer and a nail, you can make a sculpting tool.
We need no more
Yep.
justification than that. Now, look, we've been cracking on for a long, long time. We've talked about lots of things, which is great. But you did also give me lots of lovely things to look at. So let me just see if I can pull some of those up for the good people of the podcast. Yeah, there we go. So we're going to start with stuff, I believe, from Hedningen. So talk me through these little guys. I don't know if you can see them, but we've got up the first little guy. He looks like a sort of, is he a dwarf?
Let me take a look.
A
Sorry, I'm
Hollywood
just
coaching manual.
yeah. Yes. This is one of those ways that I practice sort of one of the ways that I really got started with very quick sculpting was there were people in my local league. I had been sculpting a bunch of random stuff over the years. I'd done a
This
few
is
teams
too
and things
big.
here and there, but really all that I had with this, I would just say like, all right, start of the season, give me like, pay me like $30 and I will sculpt you a coach model.
Right.
So this was a dwarf coach.
And does it look a bit like the person coaching them, or?
It looks like, oh God, what is his name? Mike Ditka.
Okay.
Yeah, so famed Chicago football coach Mike Ditka.
Yes,
Doesn't look a lot like him, but as you can tell, he's earlier version.
all
You'll
right.
see a steady progression of me being less bad at
Well, we do need
sculpting.
to crack through these, and as I said, we need to be
Yeah.
talking about them as well, because of course lots of these
Oh,
are
absolutely.
going out audibly. The next
Yeah.
one I have up is a man smoking a cigar in a very nice hat.
Goblin
He
smoking
is
a
a little
cigar. This
goblin,
is
yes.
another coach, Gob Landry, based off another American football coach.
Absolutely fantastic.
Really, just again, similar to the coach things. For those who can't see, it's gray. It was sculpted in a material known as bees putty. Is a wax-like clay that you bake in your oven, like Sculpey.
Right.
Yeah.
I just can't help seeing how big their hands and heads are now, and how
Yeah, I know.
stupid I feel for never seeing this before.
It's completely fine.
His head's
It's if you.
enormous.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
next up we have, this is a very complicated looking dead thing with lots of spikes
yeah.
on its helmet.
This is a sort of silly thing that I wanted to do. I have a third edition Undead team, and because they released the star player Ivan Deathshroud, I
Yeah.
decided, you know what? I need one that fits in that style.
See, I was going to say, before you said anything, I was going to say, is this to add to a third edition Undead team? Because he's very much got that style, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's pretty much based directly off of the Gary Morley sculpting style, and he's just designed to fit in with an undead team. Even though, famously, apparently Gary Morley hates sculpting undead.
Okay, and you started
Which
this. You didn't start with one of their pieces and amend it and convert it. This was started from scratch.
Yeah, this just started
Just
as
a
a
lump
wire
of green
armature.
putty. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so you use a wire structure underneath to show the basic anatomy,
Yes,
and then you add on to that.
that's how you. It's kind of it because otherwise, putty would just be
Gravity is a
flopping
thing.
around.
Right.
Yeah, gravity is our worst enemy, and
Okay.
time.
Now we have a lizard with a ball and chain.
Creek rust gouger, actually.
Yeah.
So
His
this,
hand, whilst huge, is less huge than the Games Workshop one, and his teeth definitely look better.
which again
And I don't
is
think his
very fun
tail
to
would
work on.
snap, so he solves a lot of my rat problems.
Yeah, and this was just kind of a fun little one-off. I like sculpted stuff, so sort of I didn't have a creek. I didn't want to pay Forge World prices for a creek, and I needed him in a couple of days. So I just thought, all right, let's sculpt something quick.
Wow. So a couple of days you made that from scratch. That's very impressive. Okay. Next up we have a goblin orc line person, possibly.
Yeah, a couple of just classic style orcs. This was experimenting with a different putty mix. There's a very talented sculptor.
A bit more blue in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit more blue, and also mixed in with a little bit of the like 50-50 with the plastoline clay.
Mm.
I found out this is how there's a very talented, I want to say Polish sculptor by the name of Cybor. Cybor's Monstrous Miniatures. If anybody has seen that, he's done a few teams, but he is very, very terrifyingly good at tiny details. And he just sort of casually put out, oh, by the way, yeah, I'm just mixing in 50% of this really cheap non-drying clay, and that's how I get such good detail.
Yeah, I know
Ah.
Cyborg. He does a lot of filigree.
Yeah, oh my god, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all hand sculpted. And
So yeah, I was
he's
noticing here the chains, I think, look great.
yeah, chainmail is one of those things that I've always chains and chainmail is one of those things that I've always tried to sculpt better and better over the years. There's an excellent sculptor who worked for Rackham in the 90s. I think he goes by Mick, M-I-K-H.
Okay.
And his chainmail is unreal in terms of how good it is. It's to the point where it sometimes goes around and people are like, "Oh, here's a shot of hand sculpted chainmail," and you can see each individual link as readable and dipping over one another, and there's weaves in the fabric, and it's gorgeous.
It's amazing what catches the eye. For me, what catches the eye here is this orc's mouth. The way it's kind of the lip is kind of higher on one side than the other. It just
Yeah,
looks so dynamic, as if he's either snarling or about to say something or having just said something.
yeah, it's
So I really like that.
again, yeah, those points of interest that we've talked about,
Yeah.
where facial expression is one of those things you can go really broad and exaggerated, and the Games Workshop style of orc is perfect for that.
Okay, next up. Oh, who's this hairy fella? That looks like a Yeti or possibly an Ulfwerner to me.
This is in fact a Yeti. This is a friend of mine was having a bit of a rough time, and uh, I said, "All right, I'm going to teach you Blood Bowl." So I got him. I bought and built the Plastic Norse team, and then he decided, "Hey, I would kind of like a Yeti to go with this." So I tried to match it to the style and proportions of the Games Workshop Yeti, and just kind of worked on sculpting it.
Wow. And is this
Uh,
person still a friend of yours after you toxically recommended
yes, somehow I am
Norse
not
to them?
a complete monster.
Well, I
I'm
mean,
still
you
finishing.
are a complete monster, obviously.
Oh, obviously, yes. I am what is wrong with society today, clearly. But
Fine,
yeah, I'm
everything
actually
has
still
blood.
working on yeah. I'm still working on this one. So you can see the actual physical model in our chat here as I'm popping it
Hang on,
around.
they can't at the moment.
Well, they can't, yeah, but I still have it with me.
They can now.
Yeah. All right. So
Oh, right,
let's
okay.
just
So what do you
yeah.
consider undone on him?
I still need to do a little hard to see because my camera doesn't like focusing, but I'm still
Sorry, I pulled
there
the model
should
up again.
yeah. I still need to finish up some of the padding on the arm.
Okay.
Actually make the straps so that things are good. I want to trim some of the accidental connecting and blending points on the fur so that each strand is a little more distinct.
Okay.
Yeah. And then
So
otherwise just make sure that the divisions between material types is clear.
it's fantastic. It's a very nice looking Yeti.
Yeah.
Next up, you wanted to show us an elf. Oh, now this elf's interesting because it's right next to a metal elf that looks very similar. What's going on here?
Yeah.
What are you showing me?
Okay, what I'm showing you here, this is a very important thing, much like I was talking about how studying the old masters, so to speak. This is a Jess Goodwin elf. And I decided, you
Best.
know what? I wanted to sit down and do my best to copy but repose and just sort of with reference to the original, see if I can, do something interesting with one of these elves.
So it is, I mean, to me it's interesting in that it looks very, very similar. You can tell the classic origin, but it's
Yeah.
less on that two-dimensional, straight line that I was talking about with the old-fashioned metal cast that had to come out of a twin-sided mole. This
Oh
it's
yeah.
gone a little more into the third dimension, hasn't it, with the same basic
The
work.
the artistic term for that is a study.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, no, so this is my Jess Goodwin study. It's there's a bunch of stuff that I'm like, oh, I didn't do that right, and you can see some of the motion lines are a little off with how the cloth is placed.
So is study like copy, but for artistic people?
Yes,
Right.
exactly like.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Good. That makes sense to me then. Let's keep going. I want to get through all of these because people
yeah,
that watch visually like this sort of stuff, and people that
yeah,
listen can just sod off for a bit. So this is
yeah,
the same sculpture from the rear, and
yep,
again, what we're seeing here is a really faithful copy. But I would say rather than a photocopy, what you've done, as you've said, is taken the same elements and then given them that slightly modern feel. So particularly here, the hair on the metal sculpt just
I don't think
drops
it's
down
showing
the
up on the
back,
screen.
so that it can
Doesn't
go.
show.
Oh, there we are. So the hair that we can see there on the metal figure just goes straight over the shoulders and down the back, and obviously trying to keep on that one line across the figure so it can be cast nice and easily.
yeah,
Whereas with the modern sculpt, of course, the hair can flow free in the
yeah,
wind, as all long hair constantly always does. We all know
yeah,
that. That's how
yeah.
hair moves.
I had to set up some wind baffles just to stop it from happening here.
Now, this one interested me. Um, who gave me this? Is this still from you, Hedningen?
Yeah, this is still from me. Like I said, I do
This
some
looks
3D sculpting.
electronic. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not good at 3D sculpting, but you know, I needed I there was some really great art in one of the books of some chaos cheerleaders that were just a chaos marching band.
Right.
So I've got the trombonist here, and then if you want to show the next one is the euphonium or tuba player.
Lovely. Lovely. I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Tuba
So that's
player.
just kind of I'm not very good at 3D sculpting, but
Hey, you
I
have to
can play
start
about with
somewhere.
it.
And I mean, looking at your physical sculpting, which I think is beyond credibility for you to ever think about. Um, I think put the time and the effort in, and those same artistic
Yeah,
sensibilities will lead you to be the next Brutefun. I
yeah.
don't want to scare Brutefun, but then we got this one up. Now, this is, I believe, a very special sculpt you did.
Yes, this is quite fun. I jokingly said, "Oh, I know, I'll sculpt PurpleChest here to see if it's possible for me to do that before the show."
Uh,
And
I am not insulted.
yeah,
I think that's a
so
lovely looking thing.
yeah, no, so
But for one, you've
using
gone
this is
for true scale head for once, rather than heroic.
yeah, roughly. I mean, roughly about the right size. He still works out to about 5 heads in height. So
So do I.
uh,
Um,
yeah,
no, I think it's
so
great. Really, really
yeah,
nice.
and kind of the real key element here. If you notice, the helmet itself is modeled on the classic Dark Elf helmet design.
It is.
The slightly pointy with the little dot and element there. It's one of those really fun, cool things. So this will maybe someday be available in the Toxic Elite Sideline Staff set. Cast in as much lead as we're legally allowed to add pewter. That way you can really truly have that toxicity in composition.
Well, unfortunately, it's already been done, hasn't it? Because Andy Davo, back when he worked with Zunk, I think Grebo Games did versions of both Andy and Zunk. So yes, Blood Bowl people have already made their way into figures. But I have to say that is a wonderful and a flattering thing. And there's him from the side. You haven't put my belly in, for which thank you hugely. That is trying to disappear over the next few years, so I do appreciate that.
Yeah,
He is
yeah,
wearing a
no,
lovely bear skin, very much like the one I wore in Stoke about 10 years ago when I did a lovely series of plays up there playing an Anglo-Saxon. What a beautiful, beautiful thing that is. And if anyone does want that figure, obviously find Hedningen, force them to put it into manufacture, and then we can all have our own PurpleChest. And what could possibly make us happier than that?
yeah,
Right, that's it for your stuff. So thank you very much. We've had a look through everything you have to show us. But I also want to have a look at some of Celaino's stuff. Again, we're going to try and talk about it as much as we look at it. That's always difficult to do, but I'm aware some of you out there still listening. So Celaino, let's have a look at yours, and then we will end, obviously, with Brutefuns as well. So the first image you gave me was this crab, which once painted, my goodness, that is absolutely fantastic. How the hell did you make
Thank you.
this? Where did it come from, other than your fevered mind?
It's Well, yeah, it's about right. Talking about Fever Mind, it's a miniature I actually played in a Games Workshop store, and I showed it to one of the employees who asked to me,
Nope,
"Well,
picture's
are
not on
these?
screen.
Yeah,
Tis now,
are
don't
these?
worry.
Yeah, are these GW minis?" And I said, "Well, this crab is different GW minis. Just tell me what they are." And of course, the staff couldn't tell me because he was younger than the minis themselves. So basically, it's the top part, the crab, main crab part is a monster of the now defunct Man of War game.
Right.
The bottom half, the legs are a Chaos Second Edition Blood Bowl miniature. The left hand of the crab is a hand of the Second Edition Frankenstein mini, and then the kind of little crab legs that I've added to the belly are Warhammer Quest's spider miniatures. So I started basically because I had the top crab part and I had the bottom part, the leg parts from the Second Edition Chaos Mini, and it kind of felt like two halves that were meant to be together. So I glued them together, but then I had to hide the seam.
Did
like
it
we talked
though?
about.
I don't lie awake at night
What?
thinking, oh, I've got half a crab I should put on a human's legs.
Yes, of course. When you try to make a Second Edition Renegades team, somewhat inspired by the Chaos All-Star Second Edition team.
Yeah.
But with different miniatures because they were not available anymore. You know, the Impact miniatures had a limited run of remade Second Edition miniatures, but
Yes.
I wasn't able to get them.
Well,
So I had to make my own.
In terms of your stated aim earlier in the podcast, that when it's finished, it should look like a single piece that has been made, you know, as it stands in front of them. I mean, I absolutely think, I don't know if you painted that or someone painted it for you, but it 100% does.
I painted it myself.
Well, then you're also very good at that. But even when I look here, and I can tell, obviously, as you said, that the crab's legs have been put on, but at the third image before the painted one, to me it looks like you've put some green skin around his belly because you didn't like how that was sculpted, that he was perhaps too thin for your vision. Even then, I didn't spot that these three parts of metal were separate things that you'd glued together with this piece of green stuff in the middle. So
Yeah,
in terms of finding
I
things
had-
with the right proportions to each other, you've done a cracking job there, haven't you?
Thank you. But it's, as you can see from the different use of green in the green stuff, it's been made over several days and several attempts. So I glued the different pieces together. And what you cannot see is on the backside, the shell has also been extended with green stuff to make it less obvious that it's two different miniatures
Right.
glued together.
We can sort of glimpse it in the middle image. Okay, we do need to
Yep.
crack on because we're heading towards a long one, and as I said, 2 hours is our maximum. So
Yep.
the next one we've got up, it's a Snake Man. Now, of all of the Games Workshop races that we've yet to see on the Blood Bowl pitch, we all know that Games Workshop lore does include Snake Men. Will we one day get them in Blood Bowl? Who knows? But you haven't waited. So
No, but
this has come about
One
from
of the main-
one of those pointy humans that we've all seen. Has
Yes,
become this
a lovely
incredible
second
pointy
edition.
snake. So where did the
and
snake
from one
come
of the well, it's on the top left. You see a screenshot of the original Kotal Mini, which is
Right.
an old Warhammer Fantasy monster, which is end of the 1980s minis. So it was.
And you've looked at that and thought, if I completely ignore the wings and the middle bit, and I cut the head off and cut a bit of the tail off, and stick them on the bottom
Yep.
half of a human, it'll look great.
Yeah, it's a bit the same thing then with the crab. Well, the idea behind Renegade's team was to make a team of mutated animals, and somehow Games Workshop at one point in time decided all beastmen should be goats, which I'm not very happy with.
Yes.
So I wanted to have a kind of, you know, mutated, but old style mutated, all kind of weird things that have grown and have been distorted and have been vaguely humanized or animalized. And that was the whole inspiration behind the team. That and having some kind of mutation, having all the available mutations somewhere on the team. That was the second thing that I attempted with the team.
Well, that's Cobblestorm. BB's just said in the chat. There is obviously a Lizard Star player, Boa Constrictor. I'm not a huge fan of the Games Workshop model there. I think yours is better. But of course, these are not for sale. These are just for you. So unless you go and rob Celaino's house, and I'm not telling you where it is, you will never get hold of them. Goodness me, a greater demon of Nurgle.
So it's still a part of the Renegades team. The big guys were all based on old style demons, so greater demons. So my ogre has the legs of the Slanesh greater demon. The Minotaur was based on the Bloodthirster demon, and the troll was based on the Nurgle.
Yes, we've got a huge troll here with tentacle arms, with a big snappy, toothy face, and obviously the characteristic Nurgle, belly Nurgleized.
So the face is a plastic troll, Games Workshop troll. The tentacles come from another, not Games Workshop mini. So basically, I could have been kicked out of the Games Workshop when I played my games.
Shocking. I always think that the trolls.
They didn't know.
Games Workshop haven't quite got trolls right yet. I think trolls should look a bit scarier and a bit more brutal than they do. But there we are. That might just be me and trolls. The next thing we have up to show people is... What the hell am I looking at here? Is it a running wombat?
It's still part of the same team. No, it's a dog. It's actually the head
is a dog.
Of one of the dogs. I think it was part of the Dark Elf Beastmaster team.
Right.
So I took legs from one of the Beastmaster's dogs. I took the head, and again the torso and hands are from a second edition human lineman.
So this is again making renegades with all the different animals. So that's fantastic.
Yep.
Big fan of that. And here we have some witch elf business going on. We have an elf with two swords.
So that's what I talked about a bit earlier. So one of the things that I did is, I have old miniatures and I have old teams from way back, but the rosters have changed over time. So the idea was to complete the rosters to be able to play them with the current rosters.
Yeah.
And with the second edition team, it's very nice. I really love the Just Goodwin sculpts. But of course, you didn't have any witch elves in the team back then.
No, I mean,
so,
the problem I've got, I talked earlier about my Dark Elves being rebased on top of 32mm bases. Of course, the one thing I do still have to do is say that one that looks like a thrower, he's of course a runner. And it does irk me slightly, but there's no runner available for this Dark Elf team.
Yeah, that's true.
Perhaps
But here, so the main idea was to have the two witches. So one is based on the Eldril Sidewinder second edition star, and the other one is based on the Catcher. And the torsos and the witch elf part comes from Warhammer Moroder sculpts from end of the 80s. No. Marauder sculpts should be 1990s, mid 1990s somewhere, but close enough to fit in.
Marauder was like 90 to 93 before it got folded back in, I think.
Yeah. So these witches must be beginning of mid or 90s, but they fit in closely enough with some cutting away of the regular torsos from the Just Goodwin sculpts. So I think I managed okay.
Benny Barthez late to the party saying he liked the Beastmaster. Doesn't look kit bashed, to be honest. Benny, we're not using the term kit bashed. We've decided that's pejorative. That's mainly for people.
No, not at all.
We're using the term converted. We prefer that. So the final one
I
we got
prefer
to see,
what I do.
The final one we got to see from you is this wonderful bloated piece. So we've got here a head with a big thumb, an arm, and a tail.
Black Orc arm.
And we've a Black Orc arm, and we put them together and turned it into this monster. So what is this?
So I took the advantage of a clear out in one of the Games Workshop stores where they sold bits by weight, and I had the opportunity to buy I think 6 or 7 torsos from Dragon Augurs around the time where Games Workshop came up with rules for a complete ogre team.
Yes.
So I said I will make a weird team out of it, but I didn't have any suitable legs. So I kind of had those pieces for a long time in my bits box. And one day I was browsing through old magazines, and I found an illustration of some kind of chaos hero with a slimy underbelly with some kind of snail-like body. And I said, like, this is a great idea. I will do some kind of Nurgle ogre. So I found a suitable part, and then I sculpted the belly to make it match, and I only had to find a few hands and a few arms to make it okay. I'm not completely convinced by the by the black orc arm, because they're slightly larger than the other hand.
Right.
So that still bothers me a bit.
Okay.
Hence why the team is not finished and not painted.
Yeah, I can see the scales ever so slightly off. Still a lovely looking thing. So wow, these conversions, and as you said, going back to some of the ones, particularly back to that first crab when painted up. It's just there's no way I would look at that and think that's 4 different pieces, well, 3 different pieces and some heavy modelling. It just looks like a single piece. It's a fantastic and persuasive art form. Brutefun, we've also had some lovely stuff coming forward from you, so let's talk a little bit about that. The first thing I'm going to show you is actually the teams. No, let's not. Let's see if we can do it the proper way. Bear with me. Yes, sort of. That's kind of what we're looking for. But first we want to have a look at this. Check that out. Look, and it's spinning and everything. So what am I looking at here? This tusky monster.
So that would be the Savage Orc's first troll. So kind of just went for kind of a jungle troll aesthetic. Lots of like half jungle, half swamp. So lots of bones, lots of gear scraped up from stuff you'd find lying around in some
And these
marshy, sweaty
oliphant
places.
tusks that have been a real feature of the Savage Orcs. Is that something you're wedded to as a stylistically, or do you feel it's just it's part of their world?
So yeah, that was the original inspirations for that was the elephants from Lord of the Rings. I was just so kind of when I'm making a model, so I try to go for like a little story or narrative, or right, I give myself a kind of a little prompt. And so for these was all right. So savage orcs, or just wild out in the jungle, what would they make stuff from? So wood, lashings, right? Some sinew, bones, tusk, whatever, and then just okay. Well, what pieces of bone would make good armor? And then or in this case, especially because orcs or greenskins being more violent and kind of very showy, so a lot of the models will have like trophy skulls in this case. So it's not just that bones to prevent armor. It was like, well, this one's like, I got a big old crocodile skull. I killed that thing.
Yeah, I love this image. I love this piece. I think the tusks and how they're joined do originally catch my eye. But having seen it for a while now and spun it around many times, what I keep coming back to is, as you said, it's the lashings on the left hand. They just look so real to me. So like that is how a lashing would be if you were just lashing some things to your left arm and heading into battle. It looks well done but quickly done. And I just think that's a fantastic piece of modelling, and the painting obviously to match as well and to really bring that detail out. Now the other thing you showed me terrified me. It was this. Now you completely ruined my day. I am arachnophobic. Why did you make me look at this? What is that? How can you justify bringing this into the world?
So one of the things I like to do when I have the opportunity to do it, usually if it coincides with a project I'm working on, is I like to go dive into the secret leagues and find little interesting things to bring out where I can. So in this case, there's a forest goblin team that has a lot of spider themed pieces in them, specifically 2 spider riders.
Yeah. And
And
that
so
that is one of them. Now we don't have it on a big turny thing, but we can
yeah,
briefly show you the other one. Oh no, we do have it on a turny thing. It doesn't come as large. So
yeah, not sure why exactly.
yeah,
It can
we
go full screen
didn't
though.
manage to work that out, but
Yeah.
I can make it
And
a
yeah,
little
there's a
larger
and
and turn it one more time. So this one is actually eating the goblin that was riding it. You
yeah,
evil
this is
sod!
this is why you should always consider rushing or not.
But they are
Um,
truly, truly horrific looking things. The stuff of nightmares. Now these are, as you said, so that they can be the goblin riders of the secret team forest goblins. But of course, the other thing you showed me, let me go back to our other demonstration window. So for those that didn't see, those are giant spiders being ridden by goblins, or at least the first one is. The second one isn't. The second one's being wrapped up in silk, about to be eaten by a giant spider. So
yeah.
truly, truly awful, awful things to be made to look at. But I presume they're also going to be like an add-on or part of this Cretaceous Crumpers fantasy football orcs and goblins team that you've shown me, which again
Yes.
has that wonderful troll with those wonderful tusks and that fantastically lashed left arm, and then has just very savage-looking both goblins um, and the goblin star weapons, which I'm about to show you in a second. They have a little squig down there. We have goblins with is that supposed to be the doom
That's
diver?
that's no that well so this the
Oh,
one
that
with
one.
the
Yeah, yeah.
little angry that's the chainsaw. The one
Okay.
that's gliding, that's the diver.
Yeah. And then there's one. What's going
So
on there?
the one on the little jumpy spider, that would be the pogo.
Ah, yes. Okay, so it's on a leaping spider. That would be your pogo
Yeah.
stick.
Then
Fantastic. So
there's
it's
the
it's
bomber that's throwing a spider egg nest or a spider egg ball.
these are properly. Yeah. Okay, so
And that
that's
would
your
be
bomber.
the ball and chain
Yeah.
with a giant skull.
Yeah.
And then yeah, that's the bomber.
I mean, these are absolutely fantastic. The dynamism on them, as we said, the facial expressions on some of these goblins. I mean, I'm not a painter, but I imagine that would be an absolute joy to paint and really bring
And
those teeth and those nose bones and things out.
and that's your dedicated dirty player because he brought knives to a football game.
And again, stood within a huge skull. So
Yep.
yeah, I mean, just absolutely fantastic.
That disturbing presence.
This is absolutely beautiful stuff. And then to go alongside it, you also showed me these, which shows how the spiders fit in. So there are the 2 spiders, and again
Yeah,
another
so
type of
this
troll,
yeah,
and
this is part 2.
yeah, and some more little goblins, and some big orcs.
Right, because now I'm transitioning into the orc part of the team for part 3.
Uh,
And these for me, it's like my soul is green through and through, forevermore.
yeah, now the one that caught my attention first up, and I just want to have another big look at him because I think he's fantastic, is that little goblin dangling a spider. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
going to have nightmares about that. The spider is about half the height of the goblin. I mean, no one needs spiders that big. They can all just stay in Australia with the Australians. So, how did this come about? Why savage orcs and savage and brutal looking goblins? Um, you're already known for doing exactly that. So why the redesign? And
So
how long did it take you to do that many sculpts?
so I've slowed down a bit mainly because my process has gotten a bit more involved, but the reason I'm redoing them is simply because my first go at the Savage Orcs was very, very early on after I started sculpting the 3rd team I ever did. And I have learned significantly more, but I've also greatly improved my anatomy. So they were always a passion project. Savage Orcs have always been my favorite faction period. There's just something funny about naked orcs running around, and they're unkillable because they believe they're unkillable. So I've always had a very deep fondness for that faction, but then redoing them simply because looking at the old project I'd done after like 2 years of looking at it, it's like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. I was like, just kind of stuck in my head. It's like, I'll just redo them.
That's why painters need someone that turn up at their studio and eventually take the paintings away, or else the painters keep going back and just amending little bits.
But in this, and I try very hard not to do that. Like I'll use, but these one are very, very near and dear to me. So
And this is root and branch
kind of
reform, isn't it? This is completely resculpting from the ground up.
right, exactly. It's not. I did not modify the models. These were resculpted from ground up, and then this is the reason why the first part is all goblins except for that one troll, is also because that's something I always planned to do for the original project, but never got around to, which was make them a viable goblin team.
Right.
Because the first time around, I only made 6 goblins so that they could run as a black orc team, but they had none of the special.
So fantastically, as I'm not sponsored by anyone, I can just do blatant adverts for people if I feel like it. So you're bringing out a savage orc team that will cover black orcs, orcs, savage orcs, night goblins, and goblins.
So technically, when all 3 parts are done, it'll be orcs, black orcs, Norse, Khorne, technically lizards, ogres, vampires too. Any team that's basically 6 of one positional and 6 of the other. Those could also work. Then goblins, forest goblins, and then forest goblins, savage orcs from the secret leagues.
Yeah, but
So
basically all
it's a
my
grand
green
total
skin
of
needs
10
will be met, and
Yeah.
then I can also put them to other teams if I wished to.
Yeah. All in all, they'll play for about 10 different teams.
Fantastic.
As far as like the models that you have access to.
Well, look, that's absolutely great. I'm overwhelmed. This is a world I know nothing about. I still feel I've only dipped my toe in, but I do feel we've talked long enough for one evening. So thank you very much for your company. I traditionally now end with a question I wasn't smart enough to think up. It may even have been some idiot savant like Dimmy G, who came up with the question I now try and end with, which is, what should I have asked you but I haven't? Okay, so this is your moment. What should we have talked about but we have yet to do? As you just have a little think about that, I'll just check there isn't something burning on my list of things to make sure I talk about that I have not covered at all. No, I think we've pretty much covered all of that. So what is the thing that you thought I would talk about that we haven't yet, or the thing that you wanted to say that is not yet covered? Failing that, it is just a time to say goodbye moment. So this is your final speech to the world about Blood Bowl, sculpting, converting, kitbashing, and owning an empire of producing STLs for other people to make the grunt work of printing off and sending to people at £1.50 profit a time. What do we wish to say else to the world? Celaino, let's start with you.
Ooh, putting into the spot.
Has to be someone.
I can't really think of anything. No, I think we covered most of it. I would just, before we go, say thank you for having me.
Been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Rather unexpected, and to all people that want to sculpt, convert, kitbash, whatever, just do it, have fun, enjoy it. We're playing with toy soldiers, so
yeah.
What could be more fun? Just enjoy and
every time we take ourselves seriously,
a bit of
we should think
creativity.
about a goblin with a chainsaw and realise that we shouldn't be taking ourselves seriously. Look, thank you for coming on, and be careful what you wish for. And if I'm in a stream talking about the subject and you go, oh, I know lots about that, just be aware it will usually end up with you dragged onto a One World, One Blood Bowl. So thank you very much for coming on. Hedningen, it's your fault we're here.
Yeah.
What have we not covered? Are you happy with the episode shape?
I am very happy with this because we got people to come on and talk about sculpting and converting, which is probably my favorite part of this. I love the game. I'm one of the few. I will say I'm one of the few NAF coaches who has run more tournaments than she has played in.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Good old 1-0 record going on right here because I live in a NAF desert. As far as things to ask about, I guess, just generally thinking about, how can also for, for even modeling and producing, how can you, the listener, if you want models for, say, tournament giveaway, because I know you've mentioned a little bit about, the overwhelming number of dice that come up over the
I mean,
years.
I loved my dice, but it's got to the point now.
Yeah,
I'm reaching enough dice.
yeah. No, you can always, and I say to that, everybody, you can always see if you find a local sculptor. See if you can work out some sort of commissioning thing with them where they do the sculpting and casting, and then you just give them out at your tournament.
Okay, so if I need, say, 140 versions of that fantastic PurpleChest sculpt, how long between asking for it to happen and getting them is it likely to take?
That depends on the timing and basically the materials. I have a good relationship with a caster nearby, so if I need to get stuff produced, usually what I'll do is finish the sculpt, get it approved by someone, and then usually it takes about 2 weeks to a month for me to get the actual spin casting taken care of.
Okay.
So usually, if you give somebody about 2 months lead time, in my experience, that's about enough. I've done it for my own tournament. I've
And
done
about
that.
halfway through, they'll be signing off on the model, and then the next half is
Yep.
casting it, and they'll get a
Yeah.
delivery.
Casting is a whole separate thing. I do
Sure.
not know much about it. I pay someone pretty well to handle that.
I mean, I suppose I should ask the same question of Brutefun. So, Brutefun, what haven't we talked about that we should, or what haven't we mentioned that we should? And I guess it is a question I hadn't asked. If I wanted to get you to design something for me for a tournament, how long would you need to produce an STL file, whatever that is, and however I would use it?
A couple days, depending on the size of the model.
Right.
So big guys take about a week. Regular size models take about a day or well, 2 to 3 days at most. Small models a day, day and a half. As far as like actual dedicated time to them. Problem ends up being fitting time for commissions in between Patreon obligations and stuff like that. Where
Yeah.
it's like just delivering monthly releases. So that's
So
generally
if
I'm
people want to do
not
things like that,
generally open for most commissions.
sure.
But as far as like rewards for tournaments or anything like that, I'm always open. Somebody can send me an email. It's like, hey, I'd like to give out some stuff for an event I'm hosting. I'm generally very happy. It's like, yeah, go nuts. Mainly because I'm not the government. I'm not anybody's dad. So
Yeah. Well, I
always
mean,
happy when somebody checks in. But
yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Anything else we need to cover, guys, before we do the hand wave and say goodbye? I think that's plenty on this.
I
I
would
guess
just echo back something that Celaino said, which
Okay.
was, yeah, anybody interested in this, just start, just do it. That like, not don't worry about like how or again, or like don't get bogged down and really just pick it up, poke at it. You're gonna suck at it at the beginning, uh, which is fine. It's first step for any of this,
Yeah.
but it's still just see if it's fun. If it is, go nuts. And then, because I'm always happy to see new people come up, regardless if like their style is for me or not. What they produce, I'm always happy to just have more people in the space, so that everybody can have what they want on the table.
So try it, give it a go, and even if you're sucking, that's fine. That's the natural part of trying anything. And then reach out for some help. Then get some people on board, giving you
Oh, I'm
advice and help.
always happy to help. So
Fantastic. I think that's a lovely point to end on. Well, look, thank you very much for informing me. Sorry to come in as someone that really doesn't understand your world, but thank you very much for giving me the time. I hope that's been as interesting to everyone else as it has been to me. And I mean
thank
what I
you for
say.
having
If you
us.
have a subject you want to talk about on this podcast, I will find the other people. We will talk about that subject. I think it's really nice that I'm able to do that, and I enjoy doing it. I hope it's a service the community enjoys too. It is nice to be back, and I'm going to try
Yeah.
and keep myself healthier, and we'll try and do some more of these. The one I put off is on the various formats knocking around at the moment. There's been an explosion in the type of formats we're playing Blood Bowl in, particularly online. And I think that's worth a quick discussion. Plus, we haven't talked a lot about online lately. So I'm going to see if we can get that one back on the schedule. But hopefully we'll be back in a week or two. I don't have as many lined up from now. This was my last one that was in reserve. So thank you very much for it. I think we'll just wave and say goodbye. And we'll call it a night there. That was One World, One Blood Bowl, number 61. Making stuff for Blood Bowl.
If I can?
Sure.
If anyone will be at Adepticon and has watched this entire podcast, the first person to find me will get a full set, a full cast of a team that I've sculpted.
Fantastic. Do put that sort of thing at the end of the podcast. It's only worth rewarding the people that have stayed all the way through.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's not much of a reward. It's a goblin team.
You see, if you hadn't said that, then it's the best reward in the world.
Goblins are great. You take
Goblins,
that back.
yeah, absolutely. Now I'm offended.
I love goblins. Much more than Games Workshop does, clearly.
Actually, before we do wrap up, I'm continuously minded. When I first started, there was a guy did a special weapons team for dwarves that were Cylons. And I watched over a couple of years. I think they were a UK-based guy, making them in metal. And over a couple of years, he then started releasing all sorts of other little Star Wars-related things and other sci-fi pieces. Until suddenly you could actually make a full team of it. But it had come to it really slowly with just one piece that seemed to catch enough people's imagination. He sold enough that you thought, all right, I'm going to do my next idea. And that was someone that was interested in selling them, and they made it go just by starting and having an idea that other people liked the sound of. Even if you just want to do it for you, I think it's a great idea just to encourage people to enjoy perhaps a part of our world and our hobby that, like me, you had not considered before. Okay, that is us going to wrap up. That was number 61, over and done. Let's wave and say goodbye. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
But
Cheers, folks.
And that helps me find that point in the edit. Though actually, this evening, as I said,